If you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the business of lifelong learning, you're in the right place. I'm Celisa Steele.
And I'm Jeff Cobb, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to episode 124 of the Leading Learning Podcast. In this episode, we're going to continue our tradition of doing after-action reviews following the events that we host as a learning provider. And in this case, we're going to be looking at Learning Technology Design 2018, but this is not actually going to be an after-action review because we don't really consider the event to be fully over for reasons we'll discuss in just a moment. So we're going to call this a mid-action review. But before we get to that review, we want to acknowledge our sponsor for the first quarter of 2018.
We are very happy to have Blue Sky eLearn sponsoring this quarter. Blue Sky is the maker of the Path Learning Management System, an award-winning cloud-based learning solution that empowers your organization to maximize its message. Blue Sky also provides a range of virtual event and instructional services to help you maximize your content and create deeper engagement with your audience. To find out more about Blue Sky eLearn and everything it has to offer, visit blueskyelearn.com.
For our resource for this episode, we're actually going to offer multiple resources. We're going to highlight two areas that we have covered in the past on the Leading Learning Podcast, and one of these is our past episodes about after-action reviews. So the after-action reviews that we have done for previous events, and we'll highlight links to those. And then we also want to highlight links to episodes we've had about virtual conferences, since in this particular case, we're going to be talking about Learning Technology Design 2018, which is, in fact, an extended virtual conference. So to get those highlights, those resources for this episode, just go to leadinglearning.com/episode 124.
So, Jeff, as you said at the outset, we're here for an after-action review, or sort of a modified after-action review. And so we should talk a little bit about what one is, if it's not a format that folks are familiar with. And there are four components to an after-action review. And basically, you kind of delve into these four areas. So one, what did we set out to do? Two, what actually happened? Three, why is there a difference between the first two, if there is a difference? So why is there a difference between what we set out to do and what actually happened? And then fourth, what should we continue and what should we change?
And we'll note that the term after-action review was popularized by David Garvin, who was really one of the leading theorists around the concept of the learning organization. And he wrote about after-action reviews as a practice used by the U.S. Army. And I will note also that following our previous after-action review on LTD 2017, David Garvin actually passed away, and that was a loss to the learning world. If you are not familiar with his work, definitely encourage you to become familiar with his work, and you will, at least partially, as a result of this episode. So we encourage after-action reviews, not just for the U.S. Army, but also as a practice for organizations that produce educational offerings of any sort. And it's also something that we recommend for individual lifelong learners. And in fact, we'll link to a post on how you might want to use after-action reviews personally, again, in the show notes for this episode.
Right, because the after-action review framework really is grounded in this idea of reflection. We know that that's key to learning. And as you said at the outset, though, we're doing sort of a modified after-action review. This is a mid-action review because it's true that the live online sessions for Learning Technology 2018 are done at this point, but we are not saying that LTD 2018 is over. In fact, we are planning to continue it at least through the end of May. That said, we feel like because the live sessions are done at this point, that this is a valid and valuable point to pause for reflection. So that first question, what we set out to do. So I would say that first, that Learning Technology Design 2018 was our third time offering LTD, and we've had some of the same goals as in the past couple of years. So we definitely wanted to continue to raise awareness of learning businesses as a profession, and we wanted to also really emphasize excellence and high performance. So what does it take to not only offer learning and educational offerings, but how to do it well? And we wanted to walk the walk because we ourselves are in a learning business. We are there to serve those who are in a learning business, and we also act as a learning business ourselves. And so, we definitely always try to take our own medicine. Any advice that we offer to others, we always try to implement ourselves. And so, LTD has been a significant part of that, of us offering a learning experience very similar to what many of the organizations we work with do.
And of course, we are in the learning business. This is part of how we, pay our mortgage and feed our kids. So we want this to be a financially viable thing that we're doing. And certainly any organization we work with, we want to help them create financially viable offerings. So that continued to be a goal as well. And then, I think one of the probably meta goals this year and over the years is just to watch how all of this evolves and to see, what kind of community does continue to develop around this, what are the topics that continue to emerge year over year, and just to help us, it's just another way that we have a sense of the evolution that's going on out there in the whole new learning landscape, the whole market for lifelong learning.
And so, as I said, several of the goals were the same as in the past, but what we put some extra emphasis on this year has been that we moved from, the first LTD, LTD number one was actually a place-based event, a 2-day place-based event. Last year, we moved to a 3-day virtual conference for LTD. And this year we stuck with the virtual model, but we moved to what we called an extended virtual model. Last year we had 3 days back to back. This year we spread sessions out throughout the month of February. And in between times, between sessions, before sessions, after sessions, we've made use of an online site of forums where people can discuss issues, topics, ideas, all related to those sessions and really not related to those sessions as well. We're out there to, again, support people in the business of learning. And yes, that's hopefully supported by what we're offering in the sessions, but it's also wide open, whatever is on people's mind, whatever they need to talk about. And then one of the other things we did this year is that we moved away from having concurrent sessions. Last year, people had choices. And so this year, everything was on a single track. We felt like that further deepens the shared experience because that way if everyone comes to the same sessions, everyone's going to have that content, those ideas as a shared point of reference, which then makes it much easier to refer back to something that's happened in an earlier session or workshop at a later session or workshop. It's easier to draw some of the connections among and between sessions.
And then another thing that we did this year was experimented with length and formats quite a bit. Obviously, we experimented with the overall format of the event and made it into the extended conference, as you were saying, Celisa. But then within the experience overall, we decided to focus on having longer workshops. So our sessions last year were not as long. We wanted to go deeper and actually had 1.5 hour long workshop sessions as part of the event this year. We also, we've done in the past what we call content pods. We had those at the face-to-face LTD, and we've done them at our symposium before. These are brief, 20 to 30 minute offerings of content around a really focused topic or a tool. And we didn't do that as part of last year's LTD. We decided to incorporate that this year and had on Tuesdays a couple of content pods each Tuesday. We did what we call Follow-Up Fridays, so a Q&A basically at the end of each week that could be about whatever had been covered during the week, but again, like the forums, could really be about anything, and we did have quite a bit come up in those Follow-Up Fridays. We did a little bit of collaborative coaching, which is sort of our repositioning, renaming of our hot seats that we've used in the past to make them sound a little more user-friendly, I guess, a little less threatening, but where we and attendees help to coach a fellow attendee on a particular topic, a particular issue or challenge. We did a little bit of introduction of some points and some badging in the community, which we can discuss a little bit more. Is a little bit of an afterthought because it wasn't something we planned, but the platform had the capabilities, and because that is such a buzzing topic right now, we thought we could at least try it out and see how that worked. And then we're currently in the midst of doing some boosting, so some sequence of follow-up questions to the event to help people remember, hopefully make some of the learning stick, give them some reflection questions and some actions that they can take, again, with the hope that, this wasn't just a one-shot event, but they're going to really carry this forward over the coming weeks and months as they're back at work, and the boosting that we're sending out by email is going to help them do that. And then, one other change this year is that we didn't have any formal sponsorships or exhibitors for the event. Last year, we had sponsorships. We had an event sponsor, we had a platform sponsor, and we had exhibits. So we actually had a day dedicated to exhibits. We decided this year we would informally recognize the companies that have sponsored Review My LMS, just kind of to appreciate them for doing that. So we mentioned, Blue Sky Broadcast, which is the sponsor of the podcast right now. They're also a Review My LMS sponsor. Community Brands, Web Courseworks, Digitel, and Next Thought. We mentioned them, but they weren't really formal sponsors of the event. We really wanted to focus more on the learning experience and just kind of be able to really commit fully to supporting that. And we put a lot of work into supporting the faculty, the speaker facilitators that were involved, as well as into our own content. So, really to focus more on that. And of course, vendors were welcome to register. They could come as attendees, and a few did, and were good contributors to it. But we didn't have that formal sponsorship and exhibitors this year as we have in the past.
And I think the last thing I'll emphasize about kind of a changed focus or a more focused focus for us this year with LTD was the fact that, as we said, we're providing LTD to support folks in the learning business. We're also in the learning business. So we really wanted to give people both the experience and the experience of the experience, a sort of a view of whether or not the specific idea or content or what was happening in a session, whether that content was particularly relevant, perhaps the format or the approach to it might be relevant, might be something that someone's wanting to borrow and use. So we kind of wanted to approach the event with both of those frames of mind and encourage attendees to think about LTD with both of those frames of reference. Both what are you learning as a learner, and then what might you also kind of borrow and apply into your own events and learning offerings at your organization.
Yeah. So what's the whole experience like, and what can you take from that? As you said, the experience of the experience.
So the second aspect of the after action review is, okay, what actually happened? So, we talked about what we kind of set out to do, and then there's what actually happened. And I would say that in general, we set out to have an extended virtual conference. We did that. We went out and had the sessions span throughout the month. We wanted to have a use of an online hub with some discussion forums to be able to support interaction among the attendees and with the attendees between, before, and after sessions. And that happened. And I think we got some good positive feedback about the forums and liking that, and some feedback about people liking the extended nature. But as any of you who are open to feedback at your organizations know, for every piece of feedback we had that said we really liked the extended format, or the discussion forums were great, there were people who weren't as supportive of the extended format. They found it hard to carve out that time over the month, or maybe didn't find the pressure to use the forums, beneficial. And I would say that, we wanted to have the live sessions, which at this point, as we said, are now over, and we did record them all and make them all available. And I would say one of the things that we saw was not huge attendance at the live sessions. It was really sort of seemed like a core devoted group who would show up and really participate in the live sessions. And then we have others who are apparently relying on the recordings to be able to find out the information and ideas and content that were shared in the live sessions.
Right. And then, as far as some of the different formats that we tried and different lengths of formats, the The content pods, which we did on Tuesdays, we only did 3 sets of those, just the way the calendar fell throughout February. And I think I had expected that maybe we would get even more people to those than we did to the longer workshops, but I'm not sure there was a large difference. I think the people who were committed to the live workshops also tended to attend the content pods. Maybe there was a small group that was just doing the content pods and not doing the workshops, and vice versa. But in general, I think the content pods were valuable because we were able to invite in some guests. We have people like Sherry Jacobs and Will Tallheimer come in. Veronica Diaz from EDUCAUSE, who was an attendee, also presented about mentoring. So I think they were a great opportunity to infuse some content, and we waited, to determine what those were going to be based on input from registrants on what topics they wanted to hear about. So those were very much registrant driven, and I think that was good. We can talk more about what we do or don't do with them going forward. But I think they were a good component of the event. The follow-up Fridays, that Q&A format, I actually found to be one of the most enjoyable parts of the event because, again, I think we got sort of a dedicated core who came to that, and we really had some good discussions that went on in those. Like that a lot. As I'd already referenced, the points in the badging were a little bit ad hoc. We did not put a lot of forethought and planning into that, and I think the participation somewhat reflected that. I think the people who ended up earning points, which were mostly tied to participation in the forums, would have earned them anyway because they were already the type of people who were going to be participating in the forum. So I'm not sure that the badging of points actually drove anything significantly different. And the boosting, we're going to have to see. We gave people the option to opt in or not opt in to the boosting. I was surprised that more people didn't opt in, though I think some of that was driven by, again, the live session attendance, and there are quite a few people who probably have not at this point done the live sessions or the recordings, so the boosting just doesn't make sense for them yet. But I think probably out of the percentage of people who really were involved in the live sessions, it was actually probably pretty high percentage that are now participating in the boosting effort, and we're going to be able to see how that goes. And then, with the vendors, we didn't have the formal exhibit, so we would hope that vendors would still show up and register and participate. And I think five different companies did have participants there, and a couple of those companies, the participants really did contribute significantly during live sessions and on the forums. So that was great. I think vendors can be such a valuable part of this entire landscape. They know so much because they see so much. So if they will show up and actually contribute in that non-salesy, we're all in the learning business and supporting each other type way, that can be incredibly valuable. And we did see at least a little bit of that. So now we've talked about what we set out to do, what actually happened, and the difference between the two. And we'll just kind of hit on that at a high level, because then we'll talk a little bit about what we will continue to do or not do going forward. I mean, we set this goal of having the extended learning environment and the community, and to support good learning practices. And I mean, in general, I think that we pulled it off. That we did have certainly a group going through LTD that represented a great learning community, a really strong learning community. I think we knew going into this that we were asking people to do something different from what they'd done before, and that of course always comes with risk. But that's part of what we're about, is trying to take those risks and see how they go. So I think we would have loved to see it bigger and more vibrant, and everybody, really participating day in and day out. That didn't really happen, but I think that the level at which people did participate and that committed group did participate, that was strong, and we have some amazing conversations going on in the event environment and the experience environment right now. We have some great content that's been captured, and the possibility for that to continue on, as you're saying, Salisa, through the end of May, and for it to just become more and more valuable over time.
Yeah, so I think the extended format showed a lot of potential, and I think I don't want to jump to step 4, but I'm already thinking we want to hold on to that, but we'll say more about that in a minute. But one of the things that I'm interested in is how can we look at the getting the number of the really committed learners kind of to grow. And, as we saw, I think in my mind, everyone who signs up is going to be that committed learner. They're going to show up for those live sessions. They're going to contribute to those great conversations, ask thoughtful questions, share from their own experience. And we certainly had a lot of that. And where we did have it, it's just great to see. It's so helpful because people sharing with each other really can provide a much easier, smoother path for someone coming along. People get a lot of value out of that. But, not everybody falls into that camp. And so I'm, wondering in my own mind, kind of what does it take to get more committed learners? Does it just mean we need a larger pool to start from because we're always going to be looking at sort of X percentage of the registrants are really going to be those committed learners? Or are there things we can do that would actually make a higher percentage of those who sign up be really committed and invest in the kinds of activities that we think add to the learning that you get out of LTD?
Yeah, and it's probably a combination of the two, and and we had hoped, I think, that with the live sessions, it's offering fewer of them, having them be a little bit deeper, and not having concurrent sessions, that we might get more people really showing up for the live portion. But at the same time, we knew in extending the event that if you can concentrate things into 2 or 3 days, then people will bite the bullet and they'll mark off their calendar and say, okay, I'm just doing this for this period of time. And we don't yet have comparisons between last year attendance percentage-wise in the live portions versus this year. But I suspect it was higher last year. Of course, the downside of that, and it's the reason we extended the event in the first place, is, you get that couple of days shot of just, so much content being thrown at you. You're just not going to be able to remember most of that, even if you do some boosting afterwards, which we would do. So, the extending it over time, I think is the right thing to do from a learning experience. It worked fabulously with the people who did really engage with it. But I think we're going to have to figure out, over time, how can we, help to facilitate a culture shift that gets the higher percentage of folks who are attending to be part of the live portion of it, along with everything else that's there.
Well, so as I said, we've already begun to delve into this fourth area, which is what should we continue and what should we change? And so I think a big question is around the extended format. And as I already hinted at, I think, Jeff, you and I are both committed to the extended format, really thinking that because of the potential for really supporting more effective learning, the ability for some space practice and some retrieval and even the interleaving by just giving some time between sessions. All of that, I think, argues strongly for the extended format. So I think we're on board with sticking with the extended format. I think we might tinker some with how we approach, how we lay out the sessions, even if we stick with the course of a month. Right now we had this year we had sessions on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Friday. And the Thursdays we had 2 workshops plus priming and synthesis. So it added up to being a fairly long day because the priming and synthesis were a half hour each and each workshop was 90 minutes. So Thursdays were a pretty hefty time commitment. And so there could be an argument to be made to spreading that out and maybe, taking half of what we offered on a Thursday. So maybe only 2 hours would be the maximum time we would ever ask people. Again, we're not totally sure yet. I think we might have to think about how to do some questioning or testing of our assumptions there, because there is something about, at least if nothing else, you could carve out those 4 Thursdays in February, and it has a little bit of that sense of carving out the 2 or 3 days for, an event that just kind of runs back to back to back. And I think that what we would like when it comes to things like badging and the points, and then also with the boosting, I think we would like to keep those, but be more thoughtful, do more advanced planning, advanced thinking about how we might use them, how we might measure the impact of what we're doing with those. And so just, in essence, be more thoughtful next time around. And then I think one of the things we've talked about that would be exciting and interesting, I think, would be to cut the tie to the clock. I mean, that with these live sessions, right now we still sort of stuck to this, it's a 90-minute workshop or it's a 30-minute priming or synthesis session. And, I think as we can all agree, you can make something fit into 90 minutes, but it may not really take 90 minutes. And so we're toying with the idea of what would it be like to sort of say, this is the start time. We don't know the end time. Maybe we give folks kind of, block 120 minutes. It will take no more than 120 minutes. But if it takes 60 minutes, then fine. If it takes, an hour and 15 minutes, then fine. Because too, we were trying to build in a lot of time for participation from the attendees, and that's often a wild card because depending on who you get in the session and what they actually contribute or don't contribute, it can change the dynamic and really the length of a session pretty greatly. So we're trying to think about ways to let the content and the interaction determine the length rather than starting with the length and saying this is how long a session is.
Yeah, time can be a bit of a tyrant when it comes to learning. It just doesn't work necessarily to place those kinds of parameters artificially on a session that's intended to be for learning. Now that said, we may actually take that more tyrannical approach to a certain degree with the content pods going forward, and really get those down to a tight 15 to 20 minutes for that content pod content. We've kind of bled a little bit from our original goal with content pods, which we started years ago with our Leading Learning Symposium. Potentially make those into pre-recorded content. So let's just go ahead and get that content pod content recorded, 15 to 20 minutes, really nailed and really hitting on the key points, and then use some live time to do some Q&A, to do some discussion, to do some activity around it. So the content pods basically become flipped content, and then we are using the live time with whoever the expert is, the facilitator is who delivered the content pod, then being engaged with people live and really being able to have some good conversation. And that might be part of the basis for our follow-up Fridays going forward, or they might be distinct sessions that we hold that are specifically around those content pods. But I think there's definitely value in continuing the content pods, but we need to rethink them a little bit. And I think we're also going to need to rethink things like what we do with exhibitors and sponsors going forward. Do we revisit that or not? And I think the jury's kind of out on that. In a way, it was nice not to have that as a formal component this year, but as I was saying earlier, vendors really do have something to contribute. So is there a way to make sure we're actively involving vendors and also giving attendees who really want that visibility into potentially supporting their buying decisions around learning technologies? This obviously is a good atmosphere to do it. So is there a way we might approach that in concert with the event going forward?
And I think, too, we probably have some decisions to make around forefronting participation in the live sessions and really explaining why that's of value and getting more people to participate. For example, we've those 90-minute sessions were workshops, and there were time for people to actually stop and do things in almost all of those sessions. And so getting people to really understand that you need to come prepared to do something. And so you're not just listening for 90 minutes, but you're actually doing some thinking, some work around it. So there's that aspect of trying to boost the live participation. But I think we have to think about balancing that then too with this promise of, you're going to have access to the recorded sessions, and so then you can appeal more broadly to people whose time zones don't match up with when we're offering the live sessions quite so well, or for the people who, again, find it hard to block off all these times throughout the month and really keep those sacrosanct, and so they're going to miss something. And so it's a little bit of that walking that line between trying to be accommodating of people who can't make the live sessions and then also really trying to play up the value of those live sessions.
Yeah, and giving some thought maybe to how we can help people to map out their ideal LTD engagement schedule, because we can't propose the ideal schedule to them because different time zones, different responsibilities, but maybe we can help them get to what it's going to be and to document it so that it's on their calendar and they're committed on those particular days and times to be participating. And that we've encouraged this relative to things like the forums as well, which are always there, but partly because they're always there, you just think, well, I'll get around to it at some point. But no, that's the type of thing, just like leaving a review for this podcast, that you have to put on your calendar and say, I'm going to do that, and here's the 15 minutes that I'm going to dedicate to going and doing something like that. So those are some of the things we're thinking about. We should note we always do these after-action reviews, in this case a mid-action review, usually before we've really looked at evaluations for the event, because we want to just kind of bring our own perspective to it. And then, of course, we will go back and look at the evaluations and factor that in as well, and maybe something we hear there will rock our world and, change something that we've said here. But at least at this point, we're on record for saying what we have so far. And, certainly hope that for anybody who's listening in, that this is helpful. Again, as you said earlier, I think we've both said, we like to walk the walk, and part of walking the walk is trying to be transparent also about what we're doing and whether it worked and, why we do it and that sort of thing. If you're considering a virtual conference of any sort or any sort of extended event like this, by all means, we encourage you to comment on this post, ask any questions you have, or just email us at ltd@tagoras.com. If there are things you're wondering about that we might be able to share with you as a result of having gone through this for a third time, and each time in a very different form. So, and I think at this point, that kind of wraps up our mid-action review. TBD whether we come back with a full after-action review at any point, but you'll probably hear at least a little bit more from us at some point. But for now, this wraps up our mid-action review for LTD 2018. And to get show notes for this episode, just go to leadinglearning.com/episode 124. And that'll give you access to those links we mentioned earlier about previous after-action episodes we've done for a variety of events. And again, if you're planning events, if you want to try out some new things, these can be great to listen to just to find out, what we did and what has or hasn't worked. And we'll also link to episodes that we've done around virtual conferences in case you're interested in potentially either launching or developing, growing your own virtual conference.
And while you're at the show notes at leadinglearning.com/episode 124, you will see various options for subscribing to the Leading Learning podcast. And if you're getting value out of what you hear, we would be truly grateful if you would subscribe.
We'd also be grateful if you take just a minute to give us a rating on iTunes. As I mentioned earlier, this might be something you want to schedule, because it's always possible to leave those reviews, but you know how it is. You say, I'll do it later. Go ahead and put it on your schedule so you know that you are going to go and leave a review and a rating for Leading Learning. And all you have to do is go to leadinglearning.com/iTunes. We'll really appreciate it. Helps us know that you value the podcast, and having those reviews in there helps the podcast kind of move up the list and make it easier for people in the learning business who are looking for a great resource to find us.
We'd be grateful, too, if you would take a minute to visit our sponsor for this quarter, Blue Sky eLearn. We put a lot of work into producing and delivering the Leading Learning podcast, and one of the reasons we're able to do that is because of the support of sponsors like Blue Sky eLearn. So please visit them at blueskyelearn.com. In addition to finding out about their services and products, you'll also find a variety of great resources that they offer for free.
Finally, consider telling others about the podcast. You can send out a tweet simply by going to leadinglearning.com/share, or if tweeting isn't your thing, just pick another social network of your preference.
So thanks again, and see you next time on the Leading Learning podcast.